We are Fandom Roulette.
Two nerds with a passion for
History,
video games,
tabletop games,
and, well, really any nerdy stuff that comes into our lives.
While we might not be able to name every ship classification in Star Wars,
Or every Pokemon.
or every spell in the player's handbook,
Well, one of us can.
we're still here to have a good time. Hey everyone, welcome to Phantom Roulette. This is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And on Phantom Roulette, we talk about a myriad of nerdy things, including history, video games, tabletop role-playing games and regular games, and sometimes we do special episodes like the one we're doing today.
Yes.
So this is going to be like a whole grab bag episode, which is going to be a lot of fun. But before we get into that, hey Cody, any nerdy stuff you've been up to recently, my man?
Oh, yes. I've been doing quite a bit. But the highlight is that I got to see, well, I guess this is kind of nerdy. I went and saw my brother and me live.
Hooray!
Yeah, and you were there too. We were there. We were there separately, but we were there, and so
But
we
equally.
both shared a deepening bonding experience with
true.
one another.
Paul and Storm were there.
Yeah, that was really good. I'd never heard them before, but their stuff was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I knew two of the songs that they did, so.
yeah, and then besides that, I ran some D&D stuff, but
Cool.
a lot of my stuff has also just been, I'm in a new place, so I'm doing a lot of house things. I'm being an adult, I guess. It's kind of boo, but you know.
Yeah, but now you have like a whole space that you can make as nerdy as you want without like any repercussions.
Yeah, and that's basically my basement.
Hooray!
Yeah. So what nerdy stuff have you been up to?
Yeah, I've been up to the same usual nerdy stuff. Legends of Tomorrow has ended for the season, although I haven't watched the season finale. Back half of the season was a lot of fun. Brooklyn Nine-Nine ended. A show that I've really fallen in love with, Superstore, ended its 4th season, and it got like very good and very dark for a comedy. And then I've just been kind of looking in general for like new shows to watch, because ever since I finished Deep Space Nine, I haven't really been able to get into anything too much. So
I bet
yeah.
that's like,
it's weird.
gosh, because that's a lot, right? Like you've been watching Star Trek for, at this point, years? Question
Like,
mark?
Probably, yeah, like maybe 3 full years.
Damn.
And I'm taking a little break before Voyager, but I'm planning on going back at some point. It's just that I needed a break from Star Trek. Although, funnily enough, there will probably be like a whole episode devoted to Star Trek in the upcoming episode. But anyway.
Nice, nice.
Let's see. Did you see the little fuzzy detective man?
I did see Detective Pikachu. That was also, it's been a while. I forgot how long it's been since we've recorded.
What did you think of the Detective Pikachu? Well, spoiler free, of course.
Yeah, spoiler free. I loved it, and immediately after I watched it, I was really sad that world didn't exist. I know, like, it's got a new name based loosely off of the Avatar movie. Not the Airbender movie, but, like, the other Avatar movie.
The blue people one?
Yeah. The basically Pocahontas in space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, there's, like, a whole condition that came out of that where people were so sad and, like, suicidal because Pandora didn't exist.
I was trying to put two and two together. I was like, how is he relating this to? I was like, is Detective Pikachu part of the Avatar universe?
Yeah, what you didn't know is that's what happened to Earth. Like, a bunch of crazy monsters showed up, and like a bunch of Earthlings left, but then some of them stayed and like kind of joined with them, and so now there's like two very distinct like worlds, and one has pocket monsters and the other one has giant floating trees and lights and
rocks.
The
mighty Akron.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like the weird floating rocks.
Yep.
That movie was gorgeous, but anyways, Detective Pikachu, I give it my double thumbs up, and I'm sad that I don't have a Pokemon.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, what about you? Did you like it?
I thought it was great. I didn't recognize all of the Pokemon because I haven't played Pokemon in a really long time, but boy howdy were they all cute. Even the ones that weren't supposed to necessarily be cute, they were cute too. Uh,
Yeah,
who do you
I
think
think.
your
Go on.
oh, who do you think your Poke partner would be?
Poke partner. I mean, in a perfect world, I would want like a Haunter or a Gengar. But
Ooh,
if based on like me, I don't know, probably like a Blastoise or a Venusaur or some variation of that.
that's really cool. I mean, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Also, this is the first time I've ever seen like a Pokemon movie, and it's kind of been a while since I've really gotten like deep and nerdy with Pokemon. Like I'm
Mm.
kind of saving all that for the new one that's coming out this year,
Oh
hopefully.
yes.
But this was the first time I knew all the Pokemon that were on screen, but I couldn't name all of them.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, because I think it's like what 800. I'm sure
Um,
future me will correct me. 807.
I think like 841 or something.
Something crazy like that. And
Yeah,
like
right.
I'm pretty good at recognizing like the first like 400. And then
Okay.
after that, it's just like a fucking landslide of like what? It really
Well,
depends on
especially
how
when
much
you,
I used them.
well, it also like, especially when you get to like, what was the one that was like set in like more or less America? That was like, was that Black and White?
Yes. It might have been. Honestly, I have a really hard time like figuring out what's what.
Was what?
Yeah.
I remember there was one where like like a snow cone was a Pokemon now.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I don't remember the name, but yeah, it was like ice cream, and then its evolved form was 2 scoops of ice cream, or no, 3 scoops of ice cream with 2 cones. It was pretty bizarre.
And it's like, don't get me wrong, like there are some Pokemon always from the beginning that have been like a stretch, but also ice cream.
Well, that's a very popular trend in Japan, from what I understand.
What
Is
crazy ice
like
cream?
no, no, like humanizing or like turning inanimate objects into like to like living things. This was actually fairly common in Japanese folklore.
Oh, okay, fair
And
enough.
like that's like a big trend among some of the later Pokemon games. Like there's a Pokemon who was in one of my competitive teams back when I played online, and his name was Klefki, and he was basically just a ring of keys, like for your car.
I think Klefki might have a cameo appearance in Detective Pikachu.
Probably as everyone's car keys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, real quick, if I go on a sidebar, that makes a certain level of sense to me now that I made fun of this like ice cream one, because
Well, but that's the thing, right? Is like you don't like that's they don't like go out of their way to say like, "Oh yeah, this is like a thing that we do." Like I only found that out by like going online, and I don't even know if that's 100% true. Like again, it's the internet days. Everything I read online is probably like 50-50.
mm-hmm.
Probably
Well,
more along the lines of 30-70, 30 being right. So like I don't know. I could be wrong.
you know
But
that like Marie Kondo show that like blew up in America
I
about like
have no idea what you're talking about.
it's a Netflix show that like caught fire and is like a whole sensation, and like her whole thing is she like loves tidying up houses and stuff, and then
Okay.
like she like will come to American houses and she'll like use her like patented system or whatever, and like the one major aspect of it is you're supposed to like collect all of your stuff and you're supposed to look at it and you have to ask yourself if it sparks joy or like makes you happy. And if it doesn't, then you either throw it away or you donate it. And one of the things that she has you do before you donate it or throw it away is you're supposed to thank it for its service.
Okay, okay.
And people were like, huh, that's like kind of a weird, strange thing. And then, apparently, like, once again, this is from the internet, so take it with a grain of salt, but like, apparently that's like kind of part of like a Shinto belief
Okay,
system
okay.
where it's
Yeah.
like everything has like a soul and a purpose. And so it's like, if you thank it for like the work it's done for you, then like it is allowed to like pass peacefully to like its next owner, basically.
That's like super adorable, and I love that.
Yeah, which maybe accounts for certain aspects of Pokemon.
Yeah. I mean, again,
It could be a stretch. We could be very very offensive right now.
I'm
But,
sure somebody will email us a very hateful worded message.
And if you do, more power to you.
Well, that's how we're gonna learn, right? If we say
Exactly.
something, I would prefer if somebody were to tell me, like, hey, like
100%. And
yeah.
like if we're in the wrong, we will definitely apologize for it the next time we record or when someone brings it up to us. So
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, we're gonna. So like I said, this is gonna be a little bit of a different episode. This is gonna be more of a full episode grab bag episode, which we haven't done in quite some time.
It
Cody
has
and I were
been
talking.
many a time.
We were both like kind of itching to talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, considering that Endgame came out this year, which wraps a almost miracle run of lots of weird stuff working, and we kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I was literally just now counting all of, because I have them
Listed
in order of when they came out in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 22 movies.
Yeah,
From Iron Man, which came out a year after I graduated high school,
Mm-hmm.
to 2019.
Yeah, that's
Nuts.
nuts.
Holy cow. 11 years.
I think it really hit me when the Marvel logo for Infinity Wars, the IO and Studios, turned into the number 10, and I was like, oh my god,
Whoa.
what? Like,
yeah.
Well, especially because it doesn't even necessarily feel like it has taken place over 10 years, Yeah. Like, there are probably some of the business who disagree with me, for the record, but it's like, it does not feel like this whole thing started 10 years ago.
I know, right? Like, I kind of... Well, and I also looked at the dates, or the years, rather,
Mm-hmm.
and it was kind of a slow build-up.
Yeah.
Like, we have Iron Man and Incredible Hulk in 2008.
Yep.
And then a whole 2 years pass before the next movie, which is Iron Man 2.
Yeah.
And then a year after that, Thor, and then Captain America. And then a year after that. So, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's a long time for phase 1, where phase 2 and phase 3 are, 3 years.
Yeah. I think it was, at least 2 a year?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that maybe, initially kind of got people, a little miffed at the Marvel system.
Yeah, I mean, when you get to phase 3 and it's literally 2 a year, even more depending, because if I'm not mistaken, according to this, in 2017 we got 3 movies.
Okay.
We got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. We got Spider-Man Homecoming, and then Thor Ragnarok.
Oh yeah. Well, and then the Spider-Man is an interesting thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I could start by briefly doing a little bit of backstory.
Yes,
history.
Of course.
Okay. So, basically we're gonna go back. We're gonna go all the way back to the 90s. So put on your flannel shirts. Grunge music is controlling the airwaves. It's actually cold enough in Cleveland right now where you can get away with wearing a flannel shirt in mid-May because everything sucks now. But anyway,
damn.
So Marvel comic books ain't doing so hot.
Not really?
Yeah, there was like this whole thing about the 90s in general where it came to comics where it's basically the comic book industry had its own bubble, right? And the reason that this happens is there are people who are like observing comic books, and they're realizing that there are comic books from like the 60s, like original Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, collaborations that are selling for like literally like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars.
What the fuck? That's crazy.
And basically, there's like a couple of things that account for this. The first one is that like basically comics were and are still kind of like pulp media. Like they're printed on not so great paper. Like they're kind of like, not I don't want to say like cheaply made, but like, they weren't intended, no one was intending for you to keep them, right? It's like newspapers. You like threw them away after you read them.
Sure.
And so those, couple of people who had some foresight and like saved the first appearance of Spider-Man, for instance, like we're saving these until like the 90s and then coming out with them, and they're saying like, hey, look, I have an original Steve Ditko and it's in like really good shape. And then like comics people looked at it and be like, I will pay you like $100,000 because there might only be like 4 or 5 copies of this left like in the whole wide world.
Right, because they were limited prints for the most part, right?
They were limited prints, and like I said, like it's a similar reason why like so many action figures from that era are popular, where it's like parents didn't necessarily think that they were going to be valuable, so they would like throw them away. They would get destroyed or for whatever reason, and so the people, like investment people were like, ooh, that means comics could become a big deal, and they started doing things like developing like special collector's editions of comic books. Except the difference is they would print lots and lots of these, and basically the comics bubble burst.
Whoops. Because
people were realizing that they weren't going to be able to sell, a comic book for like $500,000 if 100 other people had that book.
Right, right.
It's not rare.
Well, that was the thing about Beanie Babies too.
Same deal, right?
Right. Like the only ones that were ever worth a damn were the ones that were in such a limited quantity. So like everyone had that fucking purple platypus, but that shit don't sell for dick.
Mm-hmm. And that's another example of creating collectibles. So yeah. But anyway, so Marvel's not doing super hot.
And Marvel is just having a bad day with all these collectibles that they can't get off the shelves.
Yeah, and it reaches the point, and this is going to sound crazy, but it reaches the point where Marvel comic books is bought by a toy company.
Wait, say that again? What toy company?
It's called Toy Biz.
Huh.
Which was an Israeli-American company. And the guy who became their like chief, basically creative officer, was a dude named Avi Arad. And basically, yeah, so like they buy this company, like presumably to continue to like develop and sell like action figures and things like that. And one of the things that they also start doing is they have a plan where they're going to sell off some film rights of some of their characters to make a little bit of extra money, right?
Right. That's X-Men and Spider-Man.
Spider-Man and Fantastic Four.
Oh, that's right. Fantastic Four is another company.
Yeah, and so so in the year 2005, basically Marvel decides that they want to start independently creating their own films. That they would start distributing through Paramount Pictures, and eventually this gets changed when they're bought up by Disney. But basically this comes because our good friend Avi really liked the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, but was not very happy with the other ones. which, you know what, I'm not gonna fault him for that.
Wait, which ones did he like?
He liked the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans.
I don't.
The Tobey Maguire ones.
You know, as a kid, I loved them, and then I think in like the mid 2000s, with the kind of hype of Iron Man, I decided to go back and watch those three. They don't hold up so good anymore.
All right. I haven't watched them in a while, but I do remember watching 2 in college and thinking it was still as good as when I saw it the first time.
One is just like overdone, you know, like everyone wants an origin story. The only part that I really like from one is Bonesaw McGraw, which is like my alternate identity, like in real life. And then two was pretty cool. I liked the struggle of Peter trying to kind of mix being an adult, because I get that it's complicated, but then also being a superhero,
which is even more complicated.
And then 3 was just a dive bomb.
Yep.
It was just like, I don't want to watch Peter Parker pretend to be a douchebag for 30 minutes. Like, can we cut past this?
Yeah, and then that one too, like, the studio, it sounds like the studio really wanted Venom to happen, and Sam Raimi didn't really want to do Venom, and so he really wanted to do Sandman, and like that kind of makes sense based on like what Sam Raimi liked in villains and things like that. But anyway, other ones included things like Ang Lee's The Hulk movie, which if you haven't seen that one's a trip, man.
Yeah, a trip to the fucking doctors with the migraine you just got. Jesus.
We had the X-Men films where,
you know, I actually really liked those as a kid. I haven't rewatched them, but I think Hugh Jackman was the perfect Wolverine.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Also, Logan was really good.
I've not actually seen Logan.
Logan is great. You should watch that one.
I will say X-Men, I think you can see it established something in superhero movies that I'm not super duper cool with, personally.
And that is?
The fact that, like, they were like, those costumes are lame, so we're just going to have everyone wear, like, generic black leather.
Yeah, I mean, they were trying to they were trying to please a certain audience, I think.
Yes,
and like, I don't think that audience cared.
And I think people in their mind still had like Bat Nipplegate from like Batman and Robin.
And to be fair, bat nipples unnecessary, but like later on as I grow older, I'm like, you know what? I can appreciate bat nipples from time to time.
It's kind of funny, right?
Right.
But yeah, so anyway, and then of course there were those 2 Fantastic Four movies that didn't do all that hot.
Woof.
Where they were like, how do we interpret Galactus, who's like a gigantic purple man who eats planets? And it was like, it's a cloud, and you can see the outline of his helmet in it. Yep.
I mean, I didn't see them. I only know that the fire, you know, and I'll be honest to everyone out there, spoiler alert, I'm not a huge comic. Well, yes, first and foremost, terrible with names. Secondly, I'm not like deep seated in comic book lore.
I'm getting there.
But it's funny that they took the guy who turns into fire, whatever his name is,
Human Torch.
Yeah, the Human Torch, and becomes one of the most iconic Marvel characters later.
Well, do you want to hear another fun thing?
Yeah.
Remember the really bad the really, really bad Fantastic Four movie that was so bad that, like, it tanked, that movie just tanked so hard? You know?
Is it the one that they tried to, like, reboot it?
Yes, and it was Fan Four Stick, and it was a square instead of a circle, and I got mad.
Sure. Okay.
The Human Torch in that movie was Michael B. Jordan, who went on to become Eric Killmonger in Black Panther.
No way.
So there's a joke out there that the MCU revives Human Torches. But But anyway, yeah, so he basically like wasn't super duper happy with those movies, so he decides, hey, we're gonna start trying to do it our own way, and he basically like turns to a guy who was working at him, who some say was like his second in command, um, but he a guy by the name of Kevin Feige, who now kind of controls Hollywood a little bit. Um, but he basically Feige is the guy who realized that while they didn't have like the big hitting Marvel comics that everyone recognized, like Spider-Man and X-Men, they still basically owned most of the rights of the core members of the Avengers. So he had this idea. He was like, man, wouldn't it be cool to create like basically movies that crossed over into one another, and kind of like how in the old comics from like the 60s, you know, up until today, could be reading a Captain America and like Iron Man might show up for like 2 pages and be like, what's up, Steve, my friend? It's like, I need help defeating this guy. It's like, cool. Or you could have standalone movies as well, but like, you know, with the idea that there was going to be a crossover. So basically, they got a $525 million loan from a credit agency to start their own movies, and I guess there was an initial promise that there was going to be a crossover film. And there you go. That's a little bit of the background of what became like the craziest success story ever.
Which is crazy because I've been talking about this for a while, or just like trying to get my thoughts on this episode because I knew it was going to be a doozy.
Yeah, right.
I feel like the internet is very split on the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I'd agree with that.
And I guess, well, no, we're pretty far in. My personal thoughts on the cinematic universe, and I'd like you to, you know, tell me yours, is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it caters to a certain audience that likes, you know, kind of your pretty standard fun action movie tropes. That said, there are some instances where that's not the case, and there are some movies that shine more than others.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the complaints that I see online that is, I think is pretty accurate, the villains, for the most part, are pretty basic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, Iron Man 1, his, you know, white businessman who wants to sell guns. You know, pretty basic enemy. The Incredible Hulk, man who's mad that the Hulk exists, so turns into other Hulk.
Yep.
Through science. Like,
yep.
Iron Man 2, man who's mad at Tony Stark. That's a lot of people on the planet because he initially was a fucking arms dealer.
Yep.
So, you know, insert pretty basic villain there. Captain America, the First Avenger, Red Skull, like, you know, there's a very old, like, that's a very old, you know, superhero trope, which is like, make a foreign power a villain, and in this case, it's Nazi Germany, and, you know, Red Skull, and, like, kind of the Hydra, and all that stuff. Like, cool concept, but even Red Skull in that movie is pretty basic. He just wanted to search for more power, kind of became this weird red dude.
A Red Skull.
A Red Skull, if you will. And you know what? For those who don't, you know, there are other complaints with the series, but I think they're really fun. I enjoyed them, and I could see why they were successful. I think they catered to a majority of people who like fun action movies. They were, you know, they have like that Marvel formula.
Yeah.
Where if you look at a lot of those movies and they kind of play them over each other, they kind of follow the same beats.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's okay. I'm okay with that. I liked the whole 1, 2, and 3 phase. There's a couple movies that I'm kind of like whatever about,
Hmm.
but overall, besides its flaws, I enjoyed this cinematic universe so far.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I could correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Iron Man 1 and The Dark Knight come out the same year, right? I think they both come out in 2008. It's interesting, right? Because it shows two fundamentally different ways to think about superheroes, and
And you're
both
right.
ways
It is 2008.
awesome, cool, and both ways that honestly work, right? Where
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
you have Iron Man, which is bright and it's flashy and it's quippy. You have characters kind of cheese into the camera. It's pulpy and it's fun, and then you have Dark Knight, which is darker and brooding and more noir-ish, more noir inspired. Um, the Dark Knight arguably has probably still up to now like the greatest comic book villain on screen. Um, like I don't think there'd be many people who would argue against me on that. Um, but I think it was one of those things where it's like that was kind of a changing point in me as well. Where I initially really I still like The Dark Knight. I think The Dark Knight's an amazingly executed film. And they're probably like, you're talking about the MCU. Why are you talking about The Dark Knight so much? Um, it was at that point where I realized that it was like, I really want my media to be fun and escapist.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously, like the MCU handles real world stakes. Even if it's at a, not necessarily the most realistic of levels, but you have Tony Stark confronting what his weapons did to real people. And you have a Captain America movie that's all about like, at what point is government spying on their people become too much, things like that. But it ultimately ends up being fun, and ultimately ends up having like a hero being triumphant and doing silly triumphant things. And it's like, as it was at that point I realized I was like, I like my media to be kind of fun and a little silly and a little goofy, and especially my superheroes.
That's fair.
Like,
That's fair.
and so, I think that's one of the reasons why I loved the MCU movies so much, is that they were almost always bright and cheery and cheesy, and like, if people argue that puts me in the lowest common denominator, then like I'm happy to be there, because they're fun, and I've always had a good time watching them. Even the ones that aren't necessarily, beloved, like I think most people would be hard pressed to say that Thor: The Dark World was like their favorite Marvel movie, but like it has some fun moments in it. Like, you're always going, I don't think you're ever not going to be entertained at them. So yeah. I think another thing too that's fascinating to me is in phase 1 they were not it's weird. Phase 1, they're not afraid to take risks, right? Like, they hired a comedy director to direct Iron Man, because it was directed by Jon Favreau, who up to that point had done like buddy like comedy movies. And then
Okay.
he, takes a risk and he hires Robert Downey Jr., which is crazy to think about now, by the way. But like,
Oh yeah, for sure.
Robert Downey Jr. was like up to that point famous for his like crazy cycles, where it's like he would, like do a really successful film, and then he would, like fall back into the throes of like addiction and like disappear from sets and things like that. So he was a huge liability. Now he's like America's goofy uncle. But like, they were not afraid to take risks. And then I feel in phase 2 they started being afraid to take risks for like a hot second.
Yeah.
And then in phase 3, weirdly enough, they turn back around and they're not afraid to take risks again. Like, I don't know what happens, but it's fascinating to me. Like,
yeah, they were a little more open with their concepts in Phase 3. I would still say that probably Phase 1 is where they were just like, wait, you're doing what?
yeah.
You're hiring who?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing this? Whereas like once we hit Phase 3, like yeah, they take some interesting turns and they make some, solid choices. But I still feel like at that point you're still kind of like the Marvel, like, the rundown, or like how Marvel movies are supposed to go, like all the thrills and the roller coaster, like they all become kind of samey.
That is fair. I guess the one that always sticks out in my mind is the Thor Ragnarok, where it's like,
yes, yeah,
I want to know, I want to be the fly on the wall on that pitch meeting where Taika Waititi gets in there. It's like, all right, so you guys like wrote a script and it's dull and it's boring, so I'm just gonna do a superhero comedy. And they're like, oh, okay, here's $50 million or whatever. And he's like, cool, see you later. Like,
yeah, for real. That's pretty Thor Ragnarok is definitely the outlier in Phase 3 for sure.
Well, and then I will say another thing, and maybe this is like the last thing we say before we like jump into the middle section, but like I also remember too, it's like Avengers comes out, Marvel is like on top of the fucking world, and everyone's like, what's Marvel gonna do next? What's gonna happen next? And they're like, so anyway, we're gonna make a movie and it's gonna have a CGI raccoon and a tree who only says one sentence. And everyone's like, okay, that's like squandering a lot of potential. And then lo and behold, Guardians of the Galaxy becomes this beloved household name. And like, I feel like that was literally Marvel just flexing to say like, oh, you'll watch whatever we put out. Oh, you'll be there. And it worked. But
that's true. It did work to like a kind of an absurd level if you think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
like Guardians of the Galaxy, like when you think about its underlying concept, you'd be like, wait, what? You had money to produce that?
Yeah. Well, especially coming off of the Avengers, which was just like a gigantic smash hit, where it was like there was like it still has like a level of, I mean, people are gonna shoot me down for saying this, but it's like there's still a certain level of realism, even though you have aliens that represent our Viking gods who came down via an Einstein-Rosengate bridge. But like there was still a certain degree of like groundedness in the first Avengers, I suppose. Then they're like, we're going to space and it has a raccoon man. It's like, oh.
Yeah, we're gonna pal around with Chris Pratt, and he's got a tree and a small woodland creature who will talk and shoot things, and you're just like,
and
okay,
Dave Bautista, what? And Zoe Saldana. And it's like, oh, okay, but like,
yeah, it definitely was like, what the fuck?
Aren't you gonna do more of the superheroes that made you guys really popular? They're like, oh, just you wait, you're gonna cry about a tree man and a raccoon. And I was like, and then I did.
That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think like overall, I think the thing that makes Marvel movies so wonderful for me is like I said, it's just they're escapist without necessarily hiding you to the reality of the world, but at the end of the day, you know that the hero is going to win, and you feel good about it.
Yeah, for sure. I like it.
Yeah. Now, shall we head into the
middle section?
Hey guys, welcome to the middle section, where we tell you about some of our ways that you can connect to us on the social medias.
How do we do that?
Whoa, well, guys, I want to tweet at you to tell you that I am a DC stan, and I thought Man of Steel was the best movie ever made. How can I do that?
Well, you can send us your wrong opinion at fandomr_podcast. That's our Twitter handle.
Heyo, taking a stand. But what if
That's
I want
not fair. I've never even seen it.
Here's my two sentence hot take about it,
Sure.
which is Metropolis exists only to get blowed up, so I did not care about the third act at all.
Gotcha. Neat.
Now let's say I want to write you a lengthy diatribe to explain why the Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice scene, where Superman and Batman become friends because their moms are both named Martha, is actually like a good scene instead of a bad scene that everyone should make fun of forever.
I don't even want to give out the email address at this point, but you can email us at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com, and please do not write that. I'd prefer not, because I'll read it, and then I'll be sad.
I'll respond to you.
I'll be so sad, because like you're really grasping for straws at that point.
Well, did you know that both of their moms were named Martha? Because everyone does now. Now let's say I don't want to give you my email address because I'm afraid that we're going to be part of the Sony hack, and they're going to find out that we were getting ready to sell Spider-Man back to Marvel.
Okay. Well, I got an idea for you.
Okay.
You can go to our website at www.fandomroulette.com, where you can find our bios. You can find our episodes. And right before the social media links that we just described, you can also put your name and, the title of your dissertation and, continue to do that. And it'll send directly to us without an email at all.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
And then where can I tell other people to find you to listen to you? Because I'm listening right now to Joe ask this series of questions.
Yeah. A podcast within a podcast within a podcast.
Whoa.
So
we'll save that for our Inception episode.
Right. I can't wait to edit that. Well, we're on iTunes.
Nice.
We're on Google Play.
Whoa.
We're on Spotify.
I know that one.
And then our native platform is SoundCloud with all the cool hot fire rappers.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
All the hot fire rappers and us.
And us, yes. That's basically the entire population of SoundCloud.
Yep. Also, please remember. Oh wait, there's other things. There's probably other social media, right?
Oh, there's tons. We got Facebook.
Yeah.
We got Instagram, and we got Tumblr.
Nice.
And we're always looking to put ourselves on new stuff. And my lovely wife is in charge of, taking all of our nonsense and putting it into internet form. And she's been killing it.
I liked that hot new track, Antonio Vivaldi. That was some fire. That was some fire track.
That was solid.
But anyway, yeah. Also, please remember to rate, review, subscribe. I am, it's always very beneficial, and we love it so much, and we love you so much, and
yeah, this is a passion project for you, the listener.
Yeah,
we like doing this, and we want to continue to do this. So anything you can do to spread our name across the ether, we would greatly appreciate it.
All right, and now back to the show. So, Cody, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
Before you started watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, had you any idea of what the Infinity Stones or the Infinity Gauntlet were?
No, not at all. I think the only crossover thing that I even read, to be quite honest, because my nerdum in Marvel and DC is mostly television related.
Sure.
I watched Batman and Batman Beyond when I was a kid and growing up. I watched a lot of The Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah. Sometimes X-Men.
To be fair, we had really solid superhero cartoons as kids.
We did.
Some of the best, I would argue.
So, that being said, the only crossover thing I did end up actually reading was the Civil War.
Okay.
which I do have a copy of somewhere in this house.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
so yeah, Infinity Stones. I had no idea what those were at all.
I mean, I think it's kind of cool just because, they took I mean, there are probably people who will scream at the podcast when they hear this, but it's like, I would argue that the Infinity Stones, like, to the lay Marvel person, like, probably not too, or to the layman, probably not too many people knew about the Infinity Stones, or like who Thanos was, for instance, or any of those, good things, right?
Right.
But like when you look at it, I think it makes a certain level of sense to kind of build, kind of build up to that, because it allows for some cool interconnected stuff. And I think it also allows for you to, kind of, it felt like a sufficiently epic climax for 22 films.
Right, and this was something that I wanted to bring up earlier, but it kind of slipped the brain. But I think one of the big reasons why the Marvel Cinematic Universe worked so well is, besides X-Men and Spider-Man, we'll push them aside for a second. I think they chose the right heroes to put into Phase 1, because sure, in the comic scene they're the most iconic: Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Captain America. But I think on a grander scale, or like a pop culture scale, they were still fairly, like, I would argue, hidden.
Yeah.
And the fact and that's the problem with Batman, Superman, Joker, is that at this point they're so iconic, and like certain people really love certain renditions of those characters, that as soon as somebody's like, "Hey guys, we're making a Batman movie and we got so and so to play in it," everyone on the internet loses their goddamn minds.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Marvel didn't have to deal with that. Like, they were like, Robert Downey Jr., sure, that sounds great. And everyone was kind of like, well, I don't really know Iron Man. Okay, let's do it.
Mm-hmm. And then, like, in that first movie, when they have the whole montage about, how he was kind of like a genius, but a recluse, and a playboy, but like with a dark, troubled past, and he liked drinking a little bit too much. You're like, oh wow, only Robert Downey Jr. could have played this role, huh? Like, but I mean, like, I remember him saying that in interviews where he's like, like, I don't want to, like, bring up, like, I don't want to make it dark or anything, but it's like, I related to this character in a major way. Like, or, along the same lines, Captain America, like you said, not the biggest household name, at least not by the early 2000s or the mid-2000s.
Right, because at that point, pop culture had moved away from, like, those plots where it's like, because for a while in the comic books, he fought Hitler and the Nazis in World War II. And it's like, who would watch something like that now? You know what I mean? Or even in 2011,
I would say out of all of them, weirdly enough, I think Hulk had the most name recognition.
Yeah,
which is a funny thing to say.
It is, but like, I think it's just because of how uniquely different he is from most heroes, right? Because he's almost not really a hero. Yeah, he's just this guy who can become like this fucking wrecking ball of like power, but at the cost of basically his like almost sentience, if you will. Like, he's just like blind rage. And that's such a unique character. Because, like, people could argue Iron Man and Batman are kind of similar.
There's a comparison there.
Yeah, there's a couple of comparisons there. They both don't have, like, their own superpowers, but they're both kind of, like, uniquely intelligent, where Batman's a little more, like, detective savvy and like almost like a detective, whereas Iron Man's more of like the super genius. But like, there are similarities there, and like, most of the characters are like, oh, you're like this, or like, oh, I've seen this before. And then like
Mhm.
the Hulk is this weird, like, oh, like he's kind of a hero, but he's kind of also a guy who will destroy Manhattan if you piss him off.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think like one of the Hulk's biggest stories. Well, there's a couple big stories before the MCU. Like one of them is he like levels Vegas.
Jesus, that's awesome, but
Yeah, and then
also bad.
the
Don't
other
level
one,
Vegas.
yeah, listen to us. Don't level Vegas.
Yes.
And then the other one was he gets blasted off to a planet where he fights in gladiator fights and then leads a revolution against an evil tyrant.
Well, there you go.
Yep. That movie's awesome. Those comics are awesome, by the way. It's called Planet Hulk. And then the follow up is called World War Hulk, where Hulk comes back to Earth because he gets real mad at Earth. Uh,
Hell yeah.
it does not go great. And so like I wanted to bring up a point that you had brought up a little, or rather talk about a point that I wanted to agree with you on about the villains.
Yeah.
Which kind of breaks my heart a little bit because, like, I mean, okay, so, there's like a term in comics that you may or may not have heard of, and like if you have, and I'm sounding like a pedantic asshole, like I apologize, but it's called like a rogues gallery.
Okay.
And it's basically like a collection, the collection of villains, right?
Okay.
And so it's like,
yeah.
if you were to rank like superheroes based on their rogue galleries, like there's an almost constant fight between Batman fans and Spider-Man fans over who has the best rogues gallery of the two of them. But like, if you think about it, those are two heroes with very iconic villains.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, you've got, Batman's Joker, like his basically the other side of his coin.
Mm-hmm.
And then shit,
yeah,
man. Like
have,
I can't think of a villain who's more iconic than the Joker.
Dr. Doom, but that's just me. If you went up to people on the street, Joker would probably be, if you said, think of a comic book villain, Joker would probably be, by and large, like, the number one villain that you get responded back to.
Right, but then also, like, Spider-Man's got a bunch of good ones, too.
Mm-hmm.
You got my personal visual favorite, Venom.
Okay.
You've got Dr. Octopus, which has I love his bowl cut in, like, the earlier, like, renditions of him. Like, it was just so funny.
But he also just looks so cool, right? With his, like, mechanical arms and...
Right. And then, of course, Green Goblin and Hobgoblin, whenever that happens in the Spider-Verse.
And I would argue, too, I think one of the reasons that they're both so interesting is that their villains are kind of, like, interesting reflections of them. So it's
they're like different, like kind of distorted aspects of them.
Yeah, so like Riddler basically like is arguably has like OCD, right? And he wants to prove that he's smarter than Batman, which is why he lays riddles all over the place. Scarecrow is a person who like really couldn't learn how to control their own relationship to fear. And so and then like, a character like Bane in the comics is like as smart as Bruce Wayne, if not maybe a little bit smarter. He's not just brawn, he's also brains. And then if you look at Spider-Man, it's like in every case they are most of his villains are either affected by radiation or technology gone amok in some way, right? So it's like Vulture has like those magnetic wings that make him fly. Doc Ock gets fused with his arms because of like a nuclear explosion, things like that. Another one with maybe not as universally household a name is like the original Barry Allen Flash. And like in the Flash, like Barry Allen's kind of like a working class dude. He's like a forensic investigator for the police department, and a lot of his villains are like blue collar, like bank robbers and stuff. So like, you know, there's a level there too. I feel like the main core of the Avengers don't have quite as iconic villains, with one
not really.
I would say with one very notable exception, which is Loki.
Yeah,
Ooh.
We could probably do an episode, but I've got my gripes with Thor
Okay.
as a Marvel hero.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a lot of hate for it, but
no, there's an interesting... Oh, go, sorry.
Well, so to me, there's this, and it's probably something you could probably explain it out of a textbook, but like all powerful beings or like people like superheroes with these powers that are just so like ungodly unfair are not interesting to me.
Sure.
So like the first one that immediately comes to my mind is Thor and Superman. I'm not interested in either of them because like Superman has like two weaknesses. It's like a green crystal that don't grow on this planet, so you're fine, and like fucking magic, which I imagine is hard to come by in a semi-realistic setting.
Yeah.
And Thor's a literal god. Like, sure, that sounds like badass in practice, but like you have to constantly like there's no threat of danger unless I'm not understanding like the Marvel's version of Thor.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
granted, the only time that he had like a moment where that was like was a fear was when the Infinity Stones were put into place, because those are supposed to be like above him.
Fair, yeah. I would also argue, one of the ways that the comics work around it, and I think the films did this okay as well, is like I think one of the reasons that Loki is a compelling villain is the fact that, you know, it's like obviously in terms of like pure physical strength, like Thor outmatches Loki, but like Loki knows how to manipulate him, and there is that whole aspect of like betrayed by your brother thing, where it's like Thor is so like, you know, honor bound, and he always wants to see the good in people, and so that's why like Loki is able to like trick him and like dupe him in many ways, because it's like, you thought I was like reformed, but like I'm still evil. So it's like I feel like when it comes to super powerful heroes, like you have to have a certain level of like mental manipulation, not necessarily physical manipulation. But.
Yeah, because at that point, like that's the only thing you can do to create any kind of conflict. Is like, well, if you're indestructible, I have to turn this around in some way so that I can affect you. And Loki is that perfect example, because he is the trickster god.
Yep.
And like obviously is like kind of Thor's weaknesses are kind of manifested in as Loki's strengths. Yeah. Which is an interesting dynamic between the two.
Yeah. But I will say this too.
But don't get me wrong. I like Thor as he progresses in the cinematic universe.
Mm-hmm. He has a really good arc, I would argue. A really interesting arc.
Yeah.
But I will say this too. I think one of the problems with the Marvel movies in general, is that maybe they made their villains a little too expensive.
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, like, look at the Phase 1 actors who played villains. You had Jeff Bridges, who like maybe isn't the most expensive guy on the block, but it's still like a big name. You had Hugo Weaving, who was Agent Smith and Elrond and, you know, things like that, so he was a household name. Later on you had people like Cate Blanchett, pretty big deal, pretty big star. Mickey Rourke, who at that point was like not necessarily at the peak of his game, but was still, you know, people knew who he was. Like, you know, it's just a shame because I personally love like a good villain team up, a good rogues gallery, and it's like the villains just kept dying, man. It was a bummer.
Well, not only did they keep dying, but like most of them were forgettable.
Yeah.
Like seriously, I didn't even know that Christopher Eccleston was one of the villains until someone brought it up. I totally didn't recognize him in it, and he was such a forgettable character. Like, I'm sorry, but it's so unfortunate.
I bet he liked to think he was a big name.
I mean, I'm sure he does think he's a big name, and I get it. Like when you play Doctor Who, even for just a season, you're a big name somewhere.
Well, it also sucks because Malekith is like a cool villain that they totally ruined, but
yeah, I mean, but that's the thing with these movies, they're so expensive to make that at the anything that's not character growth for the hero or for people around the hero is just kind of second.
Yeah.
And so like you can't have these cool setups. I mean, with one exception, and everyone knows who I'm talking about, there's no character growth for any of the villains, even in the movies, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would argue, yeah, I think I'm looking at the list right now. There really isn't. There are two movies where there is a villain that not only gets to be in two movies, but has like a little bit of growth. Mm-hmm. Whereas most of it is just this kind of mild growth between the heroes and like the second characters, you know?
Yeah. I think another thing too, like that also really bummed me out with like Ultron specifically.
I love the concept of Ultron, and it really sucks because I feel like, and granted, I'm going to ask you this in a little bit.
Sure.
But I'm going to bring it up because it makes sense. Captain America, the Winter Soldier, my favorite movie of the Marvel cinematics.
Mm-hmm. That's a solid choice.
But like the villain in Captain America, whose name is leaving me right now, literally had the same plot, although took it to a darker place than what Iron Man did with Ultron. Because, like, think about it. Hydra just wanted to control the world by killing all the people who could be suspected criminals. Which is dark as fuck.
Yeah.
Because, like, how do you determine that on any logical level? You can't. But that's what Iron Man wanted to do with the Ultron project. He wanted to create protectors to fight off stuff so that the Avengers don't have to be on the clock 24/7.
Yeah.
So it's like, Iron Man took the lawful good approach. Fucking Hydra took the I would argue evil approach to that.
It's technically lawful evil because, you know.
Right.
I think the other thing too is like the reveal that like I think it was more like obviously Hydra was trying to stop crime, but I also think that they were also trying to take out potential other superheroes.
Yeah, Hydra wanted to control everything.
Yeah.
And superheroes kind of go against that whole thing.
Yeah. Not to justify
unless they could control them.
By the way.
No.
Also, one of my favorite jokes about Age of Ultron is that it's more like the long weekend of Ultron. Yeah, that's a little joke I have.
That's good.
And it's like I will say that might be another teensy grievance I have with the MCU. Is that it's like they are some movies have subtitles that reflect popular comic stories that don't necessarily reflect what the comics are. Now, people like Age of Ultron is a pretty disliked event from what I have been told. But still, like, I believe in that comic, it's like an alternate future where Ultron has taken over, you know?
Gotcha. Okay.
Or, like, I think the biggest one for me is, like, Civil War felt like it came way too early. Because...
Well, because with Hydra, at the very least, like, that was the end of Hydra. That should have been, like, I really feel like that could have been some phase 3 shit.
Mm-hmm.
And like you could have, oh my god, imagine if Hydra became the Phase 3 and we had and then we're still building up these Infinity Stones in the back, and that's when Phase 4 comes around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Infinity Gauntlet, you know?
Yeah.
Like they kind of, it almost feels like they cut, you know, they killed Hydra before it could do anything like
Too soon.
right, cuz
Yeah.
cuz if I'm not mistaken, in Age of Ultron, they're basically just like hunting down all of the Hydra bases.
Yeah, I believe that's. I believe they say that is the last Hydra base, which also like that means that Hydra's doing a bad job because
Right,
the
right.
whole one head dies, two heads grow in its place thing. But anyway, yada yada yada. Um, but it's like, you know, the big set piece of Civil War is like 10 heroes running across a parking lot at each other. Whereas like
Yeah,
when you
I was really excited for Civil War because of like the comic book connotations
mm-hmm.
and just like this idea that like, you know, this could go on for, you know, more than just like I could have seen like a, you know, a phase where we're seeing like they go back and it's like Iron Man 4, but this is during the Civil War, and so
Yeah.
like, you know, his mission is like I'm hunting down one of my good friends.
Yeah,
And like that could have been a very interesting Iron Man 4
I feel
or
yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
I agree with you. I feel like I feel like that's a criticism I see sometimes too that I don't necessarily disagree with, where it's like sometimes things are a teensy bit rushed. Um, like for instance, um, here are two Joe micro fixes that I would have done, which is in Iron Man 3 I would have established Ultron in Iron Man 3.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, they kind of
they hint at it.
they hint, yeah, but it's such a minor hint that like until they released like the name Age of Ultron, like there was no guarantee.
And then it's like, and like even people, and then I could hear people say, well, it's like, well, they didn't cast Ultron yet. It's like, so like you give him like a clunky robot voice, and then when he gets taken over by evil, then he gets the cool James Spader voice. Like,
I mean, there's a million different ways to do a an actor change. They've done it before. I mean, movies have done it before. They'll continue to do it. It's
sure.
not, especially
Oh,
with a CGI character. You know.
another one, um, is in Thor Ragnarok, the character played by Keith Urban, the Executioner, um, like he at the end of the actual Ragnarok story arc by Walt Simonson, he does a face turn like he does at the end of Ragnarok, but it had been building up for like lots and lots of issues. Whereas that one, it felt like his arc was just like kind of rushed, and it's like maybe if you had established him like, you know, in like the Dark World, or at least like mentioned like this executioner is a bad dude, like, and then, you know, it might have been a little bit more meaningful. There's like little things, and there's only so much you can do. I acknowledge this. Um,
Yeah, I think unfortunately, what works in comic books
yeah,
is sometimes difficult to translate because you can spend entire, you know, whole comic books on like building up these side characters
yeah,
as like these kind of backdrops and then bring them in. And I feel like with these like fucking $1 million movies, that's, you know, that's expensive, you know?
yeah,
And, you know, having these side characters when, you know, they're still trying to figure everything out, like it, and that's a dangerous gambit.
for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
It
mean,
was,
I'm still upset about it, but I'm coming to terms with it, and I agree. I think there's a couple of like, I feel like some things were rushed,
yeah.
like to the nth degree, and could have used another movie or, you know, been previewed earlier, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean and these are, I would argue, like relatively small complaints in terms of my enjoyment of them overall. Where it's just like, oh man, wouldn't it have been cool if X? Whereas like it didn't necessarily detract from my enjoyment. Although, you know, like any long series of movies, I do have my like power rankings.
Right. And I think the thing to remember, if we're coming off like we've been just shitting on the movies for the past 30 minutes, it's because it is a healthy love for the Marvel universe, and I feel like they could like it's I have a background in art,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of what we do or what we did in art school was do, you know, constructive critiques where
Sure.
you'd go in front of your peers and be like, this is what I'm working on, and they'll tell you like, this is cool, but I think you could do this and it would be more interesting. And the thing that I learned through that is if you don't have anything to say about a particular topic, that I think that's more damning than having a bunch of critiques on something. Because I think like the closer it is to like being like 100% like up your alley, I think the more critiques you're gonna have to like complete that. But if it's like just so far out and it's like just so shit to you that you have nothing to say about it other than like, I hate this, like I think that's more damning to a movie or to really any like any medium, really. Like if you have a bunch of constructive criticism to make those movies good, I think they're in the I think overall, with, you know, the fact that these cost bajillions of dollars, they're super fun to watch.
Oh yeah. And I mean,
and I loved watching them. I'm a little burnt on especially with phase 3 having like I think like 3 extra films.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a lot. And honestly, I'm a little nervous for Spider-Man Homecoming.
Far From Home.
Far From Home.
Yeah, well, I mean that says everything right there, huh?
Right, because like I know I'm not the only one who's burnt out on 22 films.
Yeah.
And if they don't fucking pull all their stunts here like they did with like Endgame, woof.
I have some MCU Spider-Man hot takes, but
yeah.
Okay, so oh boy. Okay, three quick ones.
Sure.
Number 1, I don't like this new like Iron Man protege narrative.
Okay, why?
Well, that kind of goes to number 2, which is I would like to see Peter inventing his own things, as opposed to just like inheriting like other people's things. And
I mean, is his like super suit from Iron Man still functional?
Yeah. It
Okay,
actually
never
looks more like the comic because he has those like legs that come out of the back.
Yeah. Okay, go on.
And I think the other thing is, you know, people got really excited when it was announced that he was in time to make it into Civil War, right? And
right.
So the interesting thing about Peter Parker's whole thing in Civil War is, you know, something that kind of sort of doesn't make a lick of sense, but is still, I think, effective, where it's like Peter's whole thing was Tony gets him to unveil that he's Peter Parker, and then Aunt May gets like hurt almost immediately, and then he decides that no, anonymity is important, so he puts the mask back on and he joins Captain America's side and things like that. Whereas like
well, to be fair, and I'm gonna nerd up a little bit, Spider-Man in the comics got bullied into working with Iron Man because Iron Man knew his deep dark secret at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Which was the fact that he killed somebody in the line of duty. That's
right. I forgot about that bit.
And basically he's like, I can basically wipe that away if you join my initiative. And that's when and then after that, he's fighting with, I believe he's fighting with Cap, although it could have been any of the others. And then he realizes like, oh shit, like I'm starting to agree with Cap. And then he tries to turn on Iron Man, but Iron Man already understands how his powers work, so he basically is able to like fuck him up and just says like, get out of here, like before I like turn you in.
Yeah, but in the movies it was just like, I'm on Iron Man's side. Yep.
Yeah, there wasn't
Like,
that neat dynamic of him swapping sides.
Which kind of falls more to the Black Panther role. Because Black Panther is initially like wants everyone to sign the accords and is hell bent on taking down, Bucky, and then
right. But then there's like
sides
that moment, that moment of doubt when Cap is like, something's up. Like, this was all a big setup, and like Black Panther could be wrong.
Mm-hmm. And so like I felt like he had like the more Peter Parker arc in Civil War, and so it's like I just wish that I had kind of like seen Peter like inventing his own stuff, and like I want to see him have a little bit more autonomy in the whole like Spider-Man persona thing, where it's like up to this point it's like I was given a cool suit by Mr. Stark, and like now I'm being given a cool suit by Nick Fury, like. But I am excited.
That's true.
I'm excited for my boy Magneto, or Mysterio rather.
No, Magneto's gonna be in it. Yes,
my boy Mysterio with his big dumb fishbowl helmet. I'm so
excited.
Yeah. Hey, where do you think they go from here?
Well, I know there's a couple of things that have released. Like they want to do they wanted to do a Black Widow standalone.
Mm-hmm.
They also have a couple of things that were said that I don't recognize, like just from my
the Eternals.
Kind of. Yeah, the Eternals. I don't know what that is.
What that is either. Yeah, like people aren't happy about it because no one knows what it is. Like, I know Guardians.
I think at this point, I think what they're gonna have to do is they're gonna have to throw in some new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Making nods at the original 3 phases and stuff like that, but like at this point they're gonna have to, honestly, like this was a achievement in its own right to produce this many films and not get like a huge blowback, because the only movies that I can think of that did similar, although I'd argue probably not the same, would be like Harry Potter and Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, like, Harry Potter's got, 8 movies?
Well, there's some burn-off going on in Harry Potter right now because those new Fantastic Beasts movies are
yeah. So there's technically, 10 movies in that universe.
Yeah.
There's almost, there's a bajillion Star Wars, spin-offs and movies and stuff like that.
Although
I think Aliens also had a pretty big, lineup.
Yeah. Although, to be fair with Star Wars, if it is technically canonically 11, something like that.
Yeah.
If you do one of the things we never brought up, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is technically part of the MCU. I stopped watching that show at least 2 seasons ago or whatever, and it's not like you're missing anything. It was entertaining, don't get me wrong. It's just that I haven't had a chance to go back and watch it.
Also, they're planning on doing a Loki spinoff when the Disney streaming comes out.
That's what I'm curious about. Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know what they're gonna do.
Yeah. Hey, put an Endgame spoiler right here. We'll probably do another Endgame episode because there's enough in that movie to talk about that could justify.
Oh, absolutely.
Episode.
Endgame spoilers.
Move on to about an hour and 20. That'll be a good safe spot to land on.
I'm curious if they're gonna be brave enough to do a Sam as Captain America movie. He's getting his streaming TV show, but is that gonna be a stand-in, or is it going to be setting him up for his own solo movie? Is it going to be Captain America Sam Wilson?
Right.
Just to differentiate it from the Steve Rogers Captain America trilogy, things like that, where it's I'm having a hard time thinking of maybe heroes that can sustain whole trilogies.
Right, and that's the other big thing too. I think in my head, there's only I feel like 3 is a good number before you have to kind of like give it to other people.
Yeah, rethink it
And
in some way.
Iron Man's out, Thor's out, Captain America's
Ish.
out. Well, I mean, like in terms of like the 3, no spoilers. The 3 movie format.
Yes.
We have 3 Iron
Got
Mans,
it.
we have 3 Thors, we have 3 Captain Americas. Although I'd argue that one of them isn't really a Captain America movie. They just slapped his name on the front of it.
Yeah.
Civil War. I'm looking at you.
So at the moment that means
So we got Black Panther,
when I know that Black Panther 2 is in the work, Doctor Strange 2 is in the work.
Doctor Strange. We have we could do Captain Marvel a couple more times.
Mm-hmm. We could do some more Captain Marvel. In fact,
We could do Ant-Man one more time.
In fact, I would love Captain Marvel movie to just be all in space, like her being like a space cop.
Yeah, I mean that would be dope too. And then here's the thing: are we going to see new renditions of old / at this point Phase 3 retired heroes?
Mm-hmm.
Because like, and again, you know what? I'll save it for the Endgame episode. But there's a particular character that I feel like shows up at the very end of Endgame that could potentially pick up the mantle of one of the heroes that is no longer going to be in the cinematic universe.
Okay. And I just now realized that Fox is back in the mix. So
Yup.
maybe we get some Fantastic Four movies.
Great. That's exactly what I want.
Hey, it could be good.
If Marvel takes it over, sure.
You get a good Doctor Doom in there, everyone's problems will be solved.
Exactly. I'm just really excited to kind of see what they do. Like I'm in a bit of a burnout, and like Spider-Man, I have a personal like attachment to Spider-Man, so like I am gonna see this one, but like unless these next like couple movies are like fucking like what, I don't know if I'll go see them right away.
I think it'll be hard to reach a movie that is quite as an event as Endgame. I will say that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And again, another problem is how can you fucking top that?
Mm-hmm.
Like at this point, like I think they're gonna have to scale back, kind of go, slope down, take a couple hits, and then start to build up again.
Yep, I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
All right. So you said you had a question for me.
Yeah. What is of the phase 1 through 3?
Yeah.
What is your personal favorite movie?
I juggle them around from time to time.
Sure.
But I find myself going back to Ragnarok most often.
Okay.
I think it's, I don't know. It did so many things that I liked. It was very funny. I loved everything Hulk related in it. Yeah. Probably Ragnarok number 1, and then like Winter Soldier a very close number 2.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, I think Winter Soldier is the best example of an argument I've heard about the MCU, which is like the real strength of the MCU is that it is like X movie with a superhero in it. So like,
yeah, it was the first time we had seen a movie that had a superhero in it, but wasn't your kind of over the top action, like I'm gonna beat up Satan.
Like honestly, it has a relatively like small third act of all those movies.
I mean, kind of. They
like,
do blow up a helicarrier.
They do blow up a helicarrier, but it's like,
which is kind of the size of like a fucking building.
That's fair. Okay, I take it back.
It's compared to like Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
It is small fry.
Yeah.
However, I don't think it's low key enough to be like, well, yeah, I took a flying building out of the sky. Not a big deal.
I mean, I guess maybe just in terms of it's like the sheer level of stuff going on, where it's like,
yeah, it is true. It was basically like a lot of things were happening, but Cap's real role was like kind of fighting Bucky and then completing the mission.
Yeah. And like yeah, it was like a cool spy thriller with like cool yeah, it was like a cool spy thriller.
It also had I feel like it had the more kind of realistic fight scenes, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like, especially that elevator scene. Oh, that's such a good scene where he's beating up like 9 dudes in this elevator while he's like super magnetically handcuffed to the wall.
Yeah.
And
there is something to say about that, whereas like in Ragnarok, for instance, it is a bunch of people fighting a bunch of basically flubber.
Yeah, well, what can you do?
Yeah. Yeah. And then your favorite movie. I know you said it, but say it again. So
I'm going to say it again. Captain America Winter Soldier. Movie was not only fun, but it had that interesting level of noir that I wanted. That kind of hits a soft spot for me. I really loved Hydra. I was bummed that they kind of let that one die after that movie.
Yeah.
But I also just like the growth. I feel like, because initially Captain America is kind of this like boring ho-hum lawful good paladin, if you will, who is like, America could do no wrong, da 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 da. And then like in this movie, he's like, oh wait. And he's getting kind of desensitized to that kind of patriotic World War II America.
Yeah.
And I liked that. And I love how it transitions to Civil War, where he's basically actively like, fuck government, for lack of a better term. And it's kind of like, it's my favorite transition in the series.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. You know, it could have been cool if at the end of Winter Soldier, if Hydra had actually won, and he becomes Nomad, the man without a country.
Hell yeah, that would have been dope.
I'm gonna when we get off of the mic, I'm gonna send you a picture of Nomad, and I think we should tweet it out because of how amazing it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, shall we sign off?
Yes.
All right, thank you guys for listening to this Marvel extravaganza, phase 1 through 3, aka the Infinity Saga. Yeah.
Damn, what a weird thing to say. I know that's what it's called, but like, damn, who would have thought the Infinity Saga?
Yep. Snap. Oh god. Half the world is going away. But anyway, thank you for listening. Please feel free to go back and listen to the middle section and learn about our social media, and where you can find us. But as always, we always end with our petition. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Tell a friend, send a friend to our iTunes or our SoundCloud. Give us a ranking, move us up those ladders, things like that. And if you feel like it, if you're listening to the episode, tweet at us what your favorite Marvel movie is, or who your favorite superhero is, regardless of comic affiliation, or
Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, anyone.
Yeah, really, anyone.
I would love to hear it.
Any hope or what you'd like to see in the future of Marvel, what you'd like to see in the future of DC. Like, I heard Shazam was really good.
I haven't heard anything about it, but that's good to know.
Yeah, and I liked Aquaman, even though it was kind of a mess, but it was like a fun mess.
Oh, that's adorable. It's a fun mess.
Yeah, right? I mean, like, honestly, like, yeah, we'd love to hear what your opinions about movies are. Who's your favorite Avenger? Who's your favorite, comic book character that you think could never be adapted into a movie for whatever reason? Anything like that. But anyway, signing off for Fame Roulette, this is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.